The first gunshot came at dawn, but it wasn't the sound that woke Olivia Blackwell, it was the nightmare about her son. The same one she'd been having since the mining collapse took him 3 months ago. She sat up in her empty bed, sweat-soaked nightgown clinging to her frame as the distant crack of a rifle filtered through her cabin window. Someone was hunting early, or maybe it was trouble at the saloon again. In Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878, the difference hardly mattered anymore. Olivia swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet meeting the rough wooden floor. 29 years old and already a widow with a dead child. That wasn't how life was supposed to unfold. She glanced at the small trunk in the corner where she kept Tommy's things. 8 years old. Just 8. The second gunshot was closer. Olivia reached for her husband's old shotgun, kept loaded since Robert died of fever last year. 2 deaths in 2 years were enough to make a woman cautious. She pulled a dress over her nightgown and moved to the window. The sun was just breaking over the mountains to the east, painting the rugged landscape in shades of gold and amber. Beautiful and merciless, like everything else in the Wyoming Territory. Through the wavering glass, she spotted a lone rider approaching her property, dust kicking up behind his horse, not galloping but moving with purpose. The man slumped slightly in his saddle. Olivia recognized the silhouette. Finn Garrett, whose ranch bordered her small homestead to the north. They'd exchanged pleasantries at town gatherings, nothing more. A quiet man with sad eyes who kept to himself since returning from the war over a decade ago. Folks said he'd been one of those Texas cowboys who'd fought for the Confederacy, but he never spoke of it. She stepped onto her porch, shotgun held loose but ready as the rider approached. Blood stained his left sleeve and his face was tight with pain. "Mrs. Blackwell," he called, pulling his horse to a stop. "Apologize for the early call, ran into some trouble on the North Ridge, Mr. Garrett." She lowered the shotgun slightly. "You're bleeding." He glanced at his arm as if noticing the wound for the first time. "Seems I am. Rustlers, 3 of them. They won't be bothering anyone again, but I caught a stray." He swayed slightly in the saddle. "Come inside before you fall off that horse and give me more work." Finn tied his horse to the post and followed her into the cabin. Inside, she gestured to a chair at her small table and placed the shotgun against the wall. "Take off your shirt," she said, reaching for the medical supplies she kept in a cabinet. Robert had taught her well how to treat wounds. A mining town created plenty of practice. Finn hesitated before unbuttoning his shirt with one hand, revealing a lean, muscled torso marked with old scars. The new wound was a clean furrow across his upper arm, still bleeding steadily. "You're lucky," Olivia said, cleaning the wound with whiskey. "Bullet just grazed you." He flinched at the sting but remained silent as she worked. She felt his eyes on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwell," he said finally. "Not many would open their door at this hour." "Olivia," she corrected, "and there's not much choice out here. We help each other or we die alone." His mouth twitched into something almost resembling a smile. "Finn," he offered in return. As she wrapped his arm with clean bandages, she noticed the calluses on his hands, the deep tan of his skin, the flecks of gray at his temples despite him being not much older than 35. His eyes were the color of faded denim, and they carried a weight she recognized from her own mirror. "You have a good piece of land here," he said, breaking the silence. "Your husband chose well." "Robert had an eye for potential," she replied, securing the bandage. "Said this valley would bloom one day." "And your boy," Finn asked softly, "Tommy, wasn't it?" Olivia's hands stilled. "Yes. I was sorry to hear about the accident, the mine collapse." She stepped away, suddenly needing distance. 3 months ago yesterday. "I lost my son too," Finn said, his voice so low she almost missed it. "Different circumstances, same pain." Olivia turned to look at him, really look at him. "I didn't know you had a child, Jack," he said, and his voice cracked on the name. "He was 6. We were crossing a river during the spring melt. The current was stronger than I judged. I had him on my horse with me. We were swept downstream." He looked down at his hands. "I made it to shore. He didn't." The silence that followed was heavy with shared grief. Olivia felt something shift between them, a recognition. 5 years ago," Finn continued, "sometimes I still wake up thinking I hear him calling for me. Tommy had a laugh that echoed all through the house, Olivia said, surprising herself with the confession. Sometimes I think I hear it when the wind blows right. Finn nodded, understanding without need for explanation. The ground took my boy, he said simply, swallowed him up in that river and never gave him back. Olivia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She hadn't cried in weeks, had thought perhaps she'd used up all her tears. The ground took mine too, under tons of rock. She moved to the window, looking out at her small plot of land. The vegetable garden she'd been too despondent to tend properly, the fence that needed mending, the future she couldn't imagine facing alone. "Then let's build heaven together," she said quietly, not entirely sure what she meant by the words, only that they felt right. She turned to face him. "I mean, perhaps we can help each other find something worth living for again." Finn's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment she feared she'd spoken too boldly. But then he nodded, a solemn gesture that held more meaning than any flowery declaration could have. "I'd like that," he said. 3 days later, Finn returned with his arm healing nicely. He brought tools and spent the day mending her fence while she worked in the garden, pulling weeds that had overtaken her vegetables. They worked in comfortable silence, breaking only for the lunch she prepared. "Why did you really come here that morning?" she asked as they ate beneath the shade of her porch. "Rustlers notwithstanding, my place is out of your way." Finn considered her question, taking his time to answer. "I've passed by here many times since it happened. Seen you out here, working alone, thought about stopping, but words fail me most days." "And the rustlers gave you an excuse," he nodded. "Sometimes fate makes the decisions we can't." Over the next weeks, a routine formed. Finn would ride over, sometimes bringing game he'd hunted or supplies from town. He fixed her roof before the summer thunderstorms came. She mended his clothes and cooked meals better than the basic fare he prepared for himself. They spoke of their children in small doses, the pain too raw for long conversations but too important to ignore. She learned his son had had the same copper-colored hair as his father and a fascination with birds. He learned that Tommy had loved stories about knights and dragons and had wanted to be a doctor someday. Their friendship grew with the summer crops, tentative at first, then stronger. In the evenings, they would sit on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Sometimes they spoke of the future, cautious words about possibilities. Sometimes they sat in silence, content in shared company. The first time he took her hand, they were standing at the small grave she'd made for Tommy behind the cabin. Finn had helped her place a proper headstone, carved by the stonemason in town. His fingers laced through hers, warm and steady, as they stood there in the fading light. "I used to wonder why God would let children die before their parents," Finn said. "Seems backward to how things should be." "And now?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now I wonder if perhaps they're the fortunate ones, spared from seeing how cruel the world can be." He squeezed her hand. "But I also think maybe they leave us with a purpose, to make things better for those still here." On a warm August evening, as they walked along the creek that gave the town its name, Olivia stopped to watch an eagle soaring overhead. "Jack would have loved that," Finn said, his voice carrying less pain than it once had when speaking his son's name. "Tommy too," Olivia replied. "He used to say he wished he could fly." When Finn kissed her, it was gentle and hesitant, a question more than a demand. Olivia answered by stepping closer, her hands coming to rest on his chest. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she confessed against his lips. "Nor I," he replied. That night, he didn't ride back to his ranch. They made love slowly, rediscovering parts of themselves they thought had died with their spouses. Afterward, lying in her bed with his arm around her, Olivia felt the first real peace she'd known since the accident. "I want you to come see my place," Finn said as dawn broke the next morning. "It's bigger than yours, better protected from the winter winds." "Are you asking me to move in with you, Mr. Garrett?" she teased. His expression grew serious. "I'm asking you to marry me, Mrs. Blackwell." Olivia's breath caught. "Finn, I know it hasn't been long," he said quickly. "And I know we both carry ghosts, but I love you, Olivia, and I think we could build something good together." She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I'd like to see your ranch first." His smile lit up his eyes. "That's fair," Finn's ranch was indeed larger 300 acres with a sturdy two-story house, a barn and corrals for his horses and cattle. It sat in a sheltered valley with the creek running through it, aspens clustered along the water's edge. Mountains rose on three sides, offering protection from the worst of the Wyoming weather. "It's beautiful," Olivia said as they rode up to the house. "How long have you had it?" "Built it after the war," Finn replied. "Came west to start fresh. My wife, Sarah, died in childbirth with our second." "That baby, too?" The pain was evident in his voice, but not as raw as when he spoke of Jack. "Wasn't much to keep me in Texas after that." Inside, the house was simple but well built, with large windows that let in the light. A woman from town came twice weekly to clean, but it had the feel of a place inhabited by a solitary man, functional but lacking warmth. "It needs a woman's touch," Finn admitted as they toured the rooms. "But there's space. For a family, if we wanted." Olivia's heart skipped at his words. The thought of another child had seemed impossible after Tommy, but standing here with Finn, she could almost imagine it. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes." His eyebrows rose in question. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married in September when the aspen leaves had turned to gold. The ceremony was small, a few friends from town, the preacher, and afterward a celebration at the saloon where even the miners and cowboys showed their softer sides. Sheriff Davies gave a toast to new beginnings, and for the first time since Tommy died, Olivia danced. Their first months as husband and wife were not without challenges. They both had habits formed from years of living alone, and ghosts still visited in the night. Sometimes Olivia would wake to find Finn sitting by the window, staring out at the mountains. Sometimes he would find her in Tommy's room, which they had moved his things to, sitting on the floor surrounded by his clothes. But they faced these moments together, holding each other through the pain, celebrating the small joys. They planted trees around the house, one for each of their lost loved ones. They took in a stray dog that had been wandering near town. They made plans to expand the ranch come spring. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in October. By December, the world outside was white and silent. They spent evenings by the fire, reading to each other or simply sitting in comfortable silence. Finn taught Olivia to play chess. She taught him to bake bread. It was during one of these snowbound days that Olivia realized she was late. She counted back the weeks, then counted again to be sure. When she told Finn, his face went through a range of emotions: shock, fear, and finally, cautious joy. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "As certain as one can be this early," she replied. "We'll know more in the coming months." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might break. "I'm scared," he admitted against her hair, "to love another child, to risk that pain again." "I am too," she whispered, "but I think Tommy and Jack would want this for us, a chance at joy again." That night, as snow fell outside their window, they spoke of names and hopes and plans. They acknowledged their fears but chose to focus on possibilities. Finn placed his hand on her still flat stomach and whispered a prayer of protection. The pregnancy progressed through the winter months. By spring, Olivia's belly had begun to round, and Finn hovered nearby whenever she did chores, earning himself exasperated smiles. They converted a room near theirs into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow. The fear never fully disappeared, but it took its place alongside anticipation and love. In April, as wildflowers began to bloom across the ranch, Finn brought home a cradle he'd commissioned from the town carpenter. Hand-carved with images of mountains and eagles, it was a work of art. "I hope the baby has your eyes," Finn said as they placed the cradle in the nursery, "and your spirit." "I hope the baby has your strength," Olivia replied, leaning into his embrace, "and your kindness." Summer came, hot and golden. Olivia moved more slowly now, her belly prominent. Finn hired 2 young men from town to help with the ranch work, giving him more time to stay close to home. They took evening walks along the creek, planning and dreaming. "I never thought I could be this happy again," Olivia said one evening as they watched the sunset from their porch. "After Tommy, I thought that part of my life was over." Finn pulled her closer. "I know, when Jack died, I wanted to follow him, couldn't see the point in going on. And now," he placed his hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "Now, I think maybe our boys sent us to each other." so we wouldn't have to face life alone. Their daughter was born on a clear September night, almost exactly a year after their wedding. She came into the world with a strong cry that brought tears to Finn's eyes. They named her Hope, Elizabeth Garrett Hope, for what she represented, Elizabeth after Finn's mother. As Olivia held their daughter for the first time, Finn sitting beside them on the bed, she felt a sense of completion she had never expected to experience again. The hole Tommy had left would never be filled, but her heart had expanded to create space for this new love. "She's perfect," Finn whispered, touching Hope's tiny hand with his finger. Absolutely perfect. In the years that followed, their family grew. 2 years after Hope came Samuel, a sturdy boy with Finn's red hair and Olivia's gentle nature. 3 years later, twins Grace and Faith completed their family. The ranch prospered, expanding to include orchards and more cattle. They built a larger house, with rooms for each child and space for guests. On warm summer evenings, Finn would tell the children stories about their half-brother Jack, who loved birds and could whistle like a mockingbird. Olivia would share memories of Tommy, his laughter and his dreams of being a doctor. They kept photographs displayed prominently, ensuring their firstborn sons remained part of their family story. They created the heaven they had promised each other that first morning, not perfect, not without pain or struggle, but filled with love and purpose. They built it together, one day at a time, through blizzards and droughts, through illness and health, through moments of grief that still came unexpectedly. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Finn took Olivia back to the creek where they had first kissed. Their children were at home with the housekeeper they'd hired years ago, giving them a rare day alone together. "Do you remember what you said to me that first morning when I showed up bleeding on your porch?" Finn asked as they sat by the water's edge. Olivia smiled. "I believe I told you to take off your shirt," he laughed. "After that, when we talked about our boys," her expression softened, "you said the ground took your boy. And you said then, let's build heaven together." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the wedding band he'd placed there a decade ago. "I didn't fully understand what you meant then, but I do now." "And what did I mean, Mr. Garrett?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. "That we couldn't change the past, couldn't bring our boys back from the ground that took them, but we could honor them by creating something beautiful in their memory, a life worth living." He turned to face her. "You gave me that, Olivia, a reason to get up each morning, a family to love. A heaven right here on earth." She kissed him then, the same spark between them as that first time by this creek. "We built it together," she reminded him. "That was the promise." As they rode back to the ranch that evening, the setting sun painting the mountains gold and purple, Olivia thought about the path that had brought them here. The unimaginable loss that had nearly broken them both. The chance encounter that had brought them together. The courage it had taken to love again, to risk their hearts when they knew the potential for pain. From the rise above their property, they could see their home in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney, lanterns glowed in windows, and even from here, they could make out the shapes of their children playing in the yard with the dogs. Finn reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. No words were needed. They both felt the same gratitude, the same awareness of how precious this life they'd built truly was. As they rode down toward home, Olivia thought of Tommy and Jack. She imagined them somehow watching over this family, perhaps playing together in a heaven of their own. The pain of losing them would never completely fade, but it had transformed over the years into something that could coexist with joy. They had kept their promise to each other and to their sons. They had taken their shattered lives and, piece by piece, built something beautiful. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a tribute to it. A heaven on earth, constructed from love and memory and hope for the future. And as they reached their home, their living children running to greet them with excited stories and demands for attention, Olivia and Finn exchanged a look of perfect understanding. This was what they had meant all those years ago. This was the heaven they had promised to build together.